Welcome to Scrolling to Death. Today's conversation is with a mom named Lori Schott from Colorado. Lori's daughter, Anna, died by suicide on November 15th, 2020, and social media, specifically TikTok and Instagram, played a huge role in Anna's declining mental health state. I believe so strongly that parents need to know these stories, these hard stories, in order to learn how to protect our children from this impossible mountain of harm that exists on social media. I'm grateful to have Bark Technologies sponsoring today's episode. If you are worried about your child encountering harmful or depressive content on their devices, you have to go with a Bark phone. It's the best way to ensure that you can control what your child has access to and get alerts if something harmful comes across their feed. More on Bark in the episode notes, but let's get into my conversation with Lori Schott. You know, even my sister, multiple people have asked me, what do you mean self-harm content? What do you mean pro-suicide content? And we need to show it, and it's hard to find it. It's hard to get the examples, especially things that have actually already been served to kids and then kids that have been harmed by it. So thank you for releasing that information and pushing it out to people, because that's how we get people pissed off about this and using their voices, is seeing, because there's no explanation for why this type of content should be being served by the social media platforms to children.
Honest content is so raw and real. And, as a parent that said, you're not allowed on TikTok, I was adamant about it. Check your phone. You're not on TikTok. Are you? Give me your phone. And we just kept hearing bad things about it. And to find out after she passed, and when the team was able to gain access to her phone, that they actually had to tell me, it's like, Lord, she had a TikTok account, plus she had 5 Instagram accounts. And it just set me back. But part of the story, I mean, between her journals, which are just written testimony,
I know,
and what I saw in a place that we're in a country where I thought they were protecting our kids, it was a huge wake-up call for me.
Parents think because these platforms say they're safe for 13-year-olds, they're built for kids. They are all fluffy and cartoony and avatars and trophies and all kinds of fun things for kids. We think they're safe, and they are not. And you learn that in the worst way. But can we back up though first?
Yes.
Can you tell me about her? I just want to get to know her.
Yeah.
She was so beautiful. I've seen a lot of pictures, and I just would love to get to know her.
Yeah, she was an adorable little girl. She was a little pint-sized powerhouse. She was about as tomboy as they come. Her world was on our farm, driving tractors, ranching, showing cattle, being in 4-H and FFA. It was a little rural America that we were happy to raise our kids in, because we thought it was, the best and the safest place to be. And my husband and I grew up that way. So it was just a world that we raised our other 2 sons in, and just such a sense of community, that we believed was there. And Anna got her first phone when she was 13. Her dad traveled a lot and kind of felt it was a way to connect the two. And, bus routes ending up on a farm at the end of a dirt road was just, security for me while I was away. But we had strict rules, I had strict rules about it's on the counter at night. You have to ask permission before you get any apps. I remember the conversations like, you do not post anything or say anything on these social media apps as if your grandma wasn't sitting on your shoulder.
Yeah, I love that
so
one.
It was all that you have it in your heart to know what's right and wrong. She went to a little Christian school, so very faith-based in that, and tried to teach her kids empathy, and she was just wired that way. But yeah, she got her phone when she's 13, and it wasn't until, Nikki, I think, when it kept being a game of whack-a-mole, and it seemed like every academic year that clicked by, it became more of a challenge, more of me pushing to say, where's your phone? What's on your phone? What do you have access to? You put your phone on the counter at night. And, I think, by the time she got to be a sophomore, I kind of became the ruler of the nest that, this phone needs to be in this place and this is what it's used for. Because we didn't even allow TV or PlayStations. I mean, her PlayStation games were Madden football. That was the route we went. And
Right, yeah.
that's pretty much just where we were at as a family. And it seemed like to be in her sophomore year is when we started feeling the change and started to feeling she was just more anxious. She was irritable, a little bit irritable, but you're like a teenage girl.
Yeah, right.
Still, we still traveled as a family because when you do like high school rodeos and you show cattle, you're in, usually dragging along four-legged creatures all over the United States. And it was such a great family environment to be in. But at the same time, that phone was a part of who she was. And it was just in that time that it's like, she started to slack on her chores and just trying to be responsible. And anytime you'd send her to the barn, you'd look out. And I remember it just hit me. And I just knew it was so wrong that it's like, she's sitting down there on her phone. It's like, we have these things to do. And every time you turn around, she's on her phone. So, as it proceeded into her sophomore year, and the end of her sophomore year, she was more anxious. And we believed in mental health. We live out in the middle of nowhere. So I finally found someone because I felt like her as a girl in high school. Kids are tough. Girls are tough. Exposure to just bullying and how she handles that. And we secured, going to a professional counselor, but that was 2 hours away. We are out in the middle of nowhere. So it was 2 hours up to get counseling and 2 hours back. But that's what we believed in, and we thought we were bringing it to a better space. And I remember distinctly talking to that counselor about her phone. And I said, I'm really struggling with how I feel she's so addicted to it. And I remember the counselor saying back, well, it's her connection to her friends. It's her connection to, maybe a group of people she didn't have access to. And I just begged. I said, can you please just talk to her about maybe putting it down and let's just try and break away from some of that. So not blaming the counselor at all. It was just a conversation with not knowing, what we found out in 2021. In that case, progressed to be COVID hit. And I was kind of like, Jesus, take the wheel. She's going to have her phone more. She needs it for her schoolwork. And it was a constant game of, is she on the iPad? Is she on the phone? Is she on this? Is she on that? And I let my guard down. We let our guard down and we let her have more access to the phone. And that's when I really feel like things started to tumbling for Anna, was her exposure to that. And, it became upon, I remember that summer, when we started her senior year, my husband and I got into a huge conversation about, we need to let her have her phone. She's going to be a senior. We trust her. She drives a truck and a trailer and we trust her with that. We need to trust her that she can, take ownership of this phone situation and what she's doing. And long story short, had no idea. She was doing high school rodeo that fall and we were traveling and she was VP of the Future Farmers of America, just took office on that. She had one of the leads in the play and she was planning her annual blood drive. And on November 15th, she took her life. So,
all right.
And that's where things just kind of stopped for us, as a family. And it's a pretty tough day.
I'm so sorry, Lori.
No, it's okay. It's National Suicide Day. I'm like,
I know. And that was not planned, Lori.
No, it wasn't.
I woke
planned,
up
but I've been hit with a lot of media today asking me questions.
Yeah.
Kind of like one of those things. But and I really think when that happened, I pulled back in and said, blaming myself as a parent and looking inside saying, what did we do wrong? How did this happen? She was so happy. My sister-in-law lives down the road. Her brother lives close. They just talked to her and just boom, like that.
Yeah. Wow.
But what came next were when the chapters of the book started to take on a different turn or different chapter. And I'll never forget just living in the sorrow of it all. And I was on Facebook scrolling through and I started realizing that I'm seeing all these depressing, your child is gone content and things. And I remember I flipped to on Facebook, I saw an image of this little girl sitting on this cliff looking down, seeing something in the context. It was a mental health related thing.
Yeah.
And it stopped me in my tracks because 2 days after Anna died, some friends and I went into her room and opened her journal. And that exact same image was drawn in her journal. And I shared it with my sons and they said, Mom, have you heard about the whistleblower? Have you seen Social Dilemma? It's like, do you think that had anything to do with Anna's mental health and her demise?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I guess I kind of found the courage to say, I'm not taking the blame away from us as parents or anything else, but what impacted her to do that? And I'm not kidding, Nikki. She had journals and we believed in journaling. We think it was healthy and she had the good and the bad. But to sit down and I sent you a couple of copies of things from her journal.
Mm-hmm.
It just set you back that what world was she thinking about who she was and what world was she in with the context and how painful was it for her mental health wise to look at herself in that light and basically, say the things she said about herself. So that was when the world started to open up and it's like, okay, we don't have access to her phone. We gave her phone her senior year. She can change her passcode. We had zero access to it until we found a company that was able to gain access to it. And what turned out was when the pages started to turn and then you add TikTok into this concept of, how it impacted Annalie. So
what did you find on Anna's TikTok feed after you got into the phone?
It was, and I think it was, I had a German film crew here and they were doing Anna's story and I was able to gain access to Anna's TikTok right before they came. And when I opened it up, they literally were standing behind me. And I don't have TikTok. The only thing I had was Facebook. So I didn't know how to operate it. They literally had to show me how to flip up, what the screenshots were. And it was all the horrific content that I shared with you. It was like, it brought me to my knees because I thought, in what world would a company expose a child to something like this? And I always says, you can't unsee this. Children can't unsee this, and I can't unsee it. Some of the things I saw, on her TikTok page still haunt me to this day. Yeah. And the funny thing is that I'm trying to piece together is that Anna was planning on doing a suicide awareness campaign and marathon. And I know she was looking online for that type of content because I received 2 days after she passed a packet of T-shirts and things for suicide awareness. And I know she'd been talking about it since she was a junior. And that's when people started to come forward and Anna's friend Faith let us know that Anna had told her that she saw a live suicide on TikTok and how bad it impacted her and how the girls said that Anna said it was toxic. And I know she used that word because I always said everything was toxic. And Faith, she said it was toxic and that they were going to try and get off of it. And they literally tried. But like Faith said, within a couple of days, the addiction is so bad that the kids were back on it. So
how long before she passed do you think she saw that live TikTok with a live suicide?
I'm thinking it was about 6 months.
And potentially she was searching for suicide prevention information for her event.
Her community event. And this is terrible. And I still remember us sitting at the kitchen counter and it's like, okay, Anna, you did a really big, successful blood drive. She just loved to do these community events. And that was when COVID hit and around that timeline. And I was like, you know what? Talking about mental health and kids, what about a suicide awareness campaign? I'll never forget. I said it. And I know she presented it to her school because I went back and I found the emails now where we were talking to teachers about it. So I kind of look at it now that I sit back and it's like, okay, people that are shopping for vehicles, what happens? What shows up? What comes on their feeds? And
that's the thing, Lori, is kids use TikTok like Google, like we would use Google. Like we look something up for information and they trust that information that's served to them. In fact, TikTok TikTok influences them and manipulates them to think that that's where you get all of the real information and that you shouldn't trust your parents. And so she's looking for information there and being taken down this dark hole path, and I will overlay some of the videos, screenshots of the videos that you shared with me so that viewers can see the type of content that we're talking about. And it's a stream of depressed teenage girls that are contemplating suicide, talking about finding a way out, just openly saying suicide is an option for them to deal with their issues. And that's what was being served to her by TikTok, by the algorithm.
And you compile that, Nikki, and I don't want anybody to forget about the impact of Instagram.
Okay.
Sure. On it. As you look at her journals, you can tell, how could somebody love somebody as ugly as me? This was just all hitting her from all different sides. And I think that's why I fight so hard, is because Meta knew what they were doing. The same timeline that Anna was experiencing that and writing it in her journal about, her self-worth and her appearance and comparing herself and other girls' profiles was the same time that Meta was having, they disclosed in this latest Attorney General lawsuit, I went in and read it, where they actually knew that these things were harming young girls, that they actually knew, and Zuckerberg knew, and he ignored it. He canceled a meeting he was having to discuss it and said that there was a clear demand for these filters, and sort of that, there's no data suggesting it, where there was huge research and people talking about how it impacted unrealistic beauty standards, impacted kids, girls especially. So they're actually encouraging these young girls into this body dysmorphia. And I think Anna was struggling with that factor. The sense, she was a tiny little girl. She was, kind of quiet. And I always called her our little stoic girl. At the same time, then she starts looking at this and gets involved with TikTok. And it just to me, it was just a storm that hit that no child could bear anymore.
What would you say to Mark Zuckerberg if you could talk to him, knowing that he knew how this is affecting, how his feeds on his platforms are affecting young girls and choosing not to protect them? What would you say to him?
I don't think I can say it on here, Nikki. To be honest, I can't. No, I mean, this is terrible to wish. And I hope they legally take him and put him somewhere where money can't buy his way out for what he did, because it's not just my child. It's all these children. And, he needs to be held accountable. We're farmers out here in northeastern Colorado. We have an industry where we have oversight, responsibility, and they have nothing. If we're producing wheat that is killing children intentionally, and we know it, these products, there would be legal actions, as it should be. But with him, there is absolutely nothing on this. And I think that scares me the most is I feel like these social media platforms, as in their own country, have more power than our government does right now. And we need to push back on that. And I really pray that we get some legislation passed, like the Kids Online Safety Act, to fire a shot that says, hey, we're on this. We're going to start protecting our kids. We're going to start having a voice in this.
Yeah. And let's talk a little bit about KOSA. So KOSA, Kids Online Safety Act, is a bill that passed in the Senate 91-3 in late July. And now we need to get it passed in the House. So why do you support KOSA? Why do you think that KOSA will help to save children's lives that are in situations like Anna was?
With Anna, it was always a fight for me to try and figure out the parental controls, something we never had. It was also the thing that a duty of care. I really believed, honestly, Nikki, that nothing like this would happen to a kid that would get online, that this wouldn't be possible in our country.
Right.
And it's without a warning label or things like that. And I met with the U.S. Surgeon General. I shared those images with him. And if there had been a warning label, I would have parented different. If I would have known, I would have parented different. But we have got to pass KOSA. We have got to get to a yes, where we have rights, our children are protected, the duty of care is something that is enforced, and that there's accountability on all aspects. Nobody that big and that powerful should have the wild, wild west to run in with our kids.
No. And we are filming this on September 10th. And next week, we'll both be going to DC along with dozens and dozens of other parents and advocates to be meeting with members of the House of Representatives to ask them to co-sponsor COSA and get it passed through the House so that we can get this bill made into law this year. So parents who are listening can go to house.gov and find out who their representative is if they don't know by putting in your zip code, and just message them or call and ask them to co-sponsor COSA, KOSA, or say Kids Online Safety Act. It is so important, and you can definitely take 2 minutes. If Lori can sit here and tell her story and relive the worst experience she's ever had in her life over and over to protect our children, the least we can do as parents is make that phone call. And so legislation, we need it to require the companies to protect our children because they're not doing it on their own. And another tactic is to take legal action and file lawsuits against the companies. So is that something that you've taken on?
Yes, I have. That was kind of the thing that when I received that information was kind of the thing that pushed me to look at all this content that I have, look at what I'm seeing, to contact the Social Media Victims Law Center because I'd heard about them and seen things about them, and working alongside of them because they're not just working on the legislative, on the legal side, they're working on the legislative side, and they're fighting just as hard. And I don't think I would have found a voice unless it was for the Social Media Victims Law Center and Dr. Murthy, encouraging us to tell our stories because our stories are pretty powerful, and it breaks my heart. Every harm that you hear about on social media, you can see a child's face that their parent. You can see those kids, and those kids have kind of become like all of our kids on the parents group that have lost children. So I think, in short, this is a hill I'm willing to die on for this cause. I am not going to stand back from it. I am not going to back down on telling her stories. I am not going to back down on showing the content that she was exposed to.
Yeah.
And that is why I'm going to sit there when I'm on Capitol Hill with poster boards that show these harms that she was exposed to. If that doesn't stop you in your tracks to say this is wrong, I don't know what would.
Pausing here to take a breath. I know these stories can be hard to listen to, but parents can have hope in knowing that there are products that exist now to help us protect our children. A product that I love to recommend is called the Bark Phone. We don't have to be in the dark thanks to the monitoring technology from Bark. Bark looked deep into stories like Anna's in order to help families avoid tragedies like what happened to their family. With the Bark Phone, you can manage what your child has access to, approve contacts, block certain sites after bedtime, and a lot more. It can grow with your child, adding new features and apps as they mature, or dial it back to give them a breather. Giving your child a phone can be super scary and stressful, but Bark can alleviate that stress and allow us to focus on what's important, keeping that connection with our child strong. Now back to my conversation with Lori. And parents, please, 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 I'm going to ask you if you have any advice for parents too, but please check your child's devices at home, check their school-issued devices. I did so 2 days ago, yesterday at my daughter's school. And within a minute of scrolling through the YouTube that is allowed on her school-issued device, I was shown a video telling her that hurting herself is easy and showing herself how to cut her skin. Listen, I have never felt that way. I've never experienced something like that. Could you imagine if I had not found that first, and then my 8-year-old is being served with content telling her to self-harm on her school device, let alone and those have more filters than we have at home. So parents, you cannot trust these companies to protect our children and serve them safe content into their feeds, even at school. So that's my big takeaway for today for parents is don't trust the companies, don't trust the devices. You have to check them and restrict them as much as possible and monitor. So, Lori, what do you want to share with parents regarding, legislation is going to take a while. What changes would you recommend they make right now in their homes to protect their kids?
Education. I think we need to educate our parents. Even out here in little northeastern Colorado, we're doing online harm prevention. With community leaders, we're talking about it. We're going to the schools. And I think we all need to look at it from all parents getting together to ally against these harms. And I agree with you. You can't trust it. I was like, okay, when Anna had her iPad, what is she exposed to at the school? And you try and look at that and you believe it. Mm-hmm. And those platforms are not designed for parents to have oversight on. And we just need to keep messaging and keep talking about it.
So sending these messages, sending this episode, sending these interviews around to your friends. And I honestly think that something like this can be heard by a teenager, especially if your teenager has a phone. They need to know the children that have been harmed. And that has also been helpful for me in getting to know the kids and seeing the similarities in my children and the children who we've lost. And that helps me to see it very clearly and realize that this could be my kid in just a couple of years if I don't stand up and protect them. And that is what you are doing, and all the parent advocates and parent survivors who stand up and tell their stories. So Lori, thank you so much for everything that you do. I cannot wait to meet you in person in DC next week and stand beside you and get COSA passed. So thank you so much, Lori.
No, thank you for what you do, Nikki. Like I said, you're a guiding light. Morning, noon, and night, I'm following you. So thank you for giving us the tools we need to keep fighting this too. The information. That's what we need.
And anything else you need, you always email me, please.
Thanks.